Welcome back to Too Lazy to Read. You know, where we do all that thinking for you so you don't have
Yeah,
to.
that's right.
Today, we're diving into Growth by the economist Daniel Susskind.
Oh, this is a good one.
It is a good one.
Yeah.
It's packed with insights about how economic growth has shaped the world. And I think this is going to be really relevant for our listeners, especially those who are looking to,
Build a good future for themselves.
exactly, yeah, build a good future, build a solid foundation for themselves. So,
Secure that bag.
yeah, secure the bag, right?
Hit that bread.
Get that bread, exactly.
Yeah.
So Susskind kind of starts off painting this picture of what he calls the long stagnation. And it was this period where, like, economic life was basically frozen in time.
Yeah, like the world just stood still economically for centuries.
Yeah, it's kind of wild to think about, like, for centuries, the average person's standard of living barely changed. Like,
Yeah.
it was just stuck.
Yeah, and he brings up Thomas Malthus to try to illustrate this, the Malthusian trap.
Yeah, Malthus.
It's this idea that no matter how much progress humanity makes, we're always going to be stuck just scraping by because population growth will just gobble up any of those gains in prosperity.
So it's like every time we, like, take one step forward,
2 steps back.
2 steps back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's pretty wild to think about. Like, for most of history, a Stone Age hunter-gatherer might have had a similar quality of life to someone in, like, the 18th century.
No iPhones.
No iPhones, no global travel, no Amazon Prime.
It's just the daily grind of survival.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Susskind, he doesn't leave us in this economic doom and gloom. He actually talks about how we broke free from this Malthusian trap.
It's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Yes, thank goodness, because I like my iPhone.
Yeah.
But he says it wasn't just about, like, getting more resources or, like, labor or capital or whatever. Like, people think about that stuff.
It's deeper than that.
Yeah, it was deeper than that.
Yeah, economists like Solow and Swan figured out that technological progress was really the key.
Like a game changer.
Game changer.
Yeah, so it's not just about building more factories. You can only build so many before things plateau, but new ideas and innovations, those are what really drive lasting growth. Okay, so ideas are the secret sauce.
Ideas are the secret sauce.
But, like, how do you measure the impact of something as intangible as an idea? You can't really, like, put it on a scale.
Right, it's not a physical thing.
And that's where he brings in the history of GDP. And it's actually a pretty interesting story.
I was surprised by that myself.
Yeah, me too. And, a lot of people think of GDP as, like, a dry, boring statistics.
Ooh, numbers.
But Susskind, like, reveals this fascinating backstory behind how it became, like, the main measure of economic progress, like, in the world.
Yeah, the metric for how well a country is doing.
Exactly. And it wasn't like, a smooth ride to get there.
No, definitely not.
Early attempts to even, like, calculate national income were met with resistance.
Like some governments didn't want people poking around in their finances.
Yeah, it's like they were afraid of transparency or something. Yeah, some economists were even exiled or punished for trying to track these numbers.
Can you imagine
Wild.
getting in trouble for doing math?
Yeah, exactly.
But it was really World War II and the Cold War that kind of pushed GDP to the forefront.
Because governments needed a way to, like, compare their economic strength, right?
Exactly. Like, who's got the bigger economy? Who's winning the economic arms race?
Right, it's like a measuring stick,
Yeah.
And GDP became, like, the go-to for that.
Yeah.
But so after World War II, economic growth kind of morphed into this, like, solution for everything.
Like, if there was a problem, the answer was always more growth.
Yeah, more growth, more
Yeah.
growth. Like, nobody was thinking about, like, the potential downsides.
And Susskind points out that this led to a kind of dangerous complacency.
Like, we just assumed that growth would solve all our problems, and we didn't really stop to think about the costs.
Yeah, we were focused on growing the pie, but we didn't notice the cracks forming in the foundation.
And, those cracks, they led to some pretty big issues.
Yeah, like climate change.
Right. I mean, it's pretty obvious that burning fossil fuels to power economic growth has messed with the environment.
The numbers are pretty scary, actually. CO2 levels were stable for thousands of years, and then in the 1950s, they just shot up.
And, like, the rate of increase in the last few decades is unlike anything we've seen in almost a million years.
It's a bit concerning, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
But Susskind also talks about how growth has fueled inequality.
Yeah, it's like the pie might be getting bigger, but a handful of people are taking bigger and bigger slices.
Leaving less for everyone else.
Exactly. And there's this striking visual. He talks about the elephant chart.
I've seen that.
It shows how the richest 1% have captured way more of the gains from globalization than everyone else.
And many in the middle class have seen their incomes stagnate.
It's a pretty clear reminder that growth doesn't automatically mean a better life for everyone.
Right. And then there's like the big one that I know a lot of young people are worried about.
Oh, yeah.
Robots.
The robots are coming.
Yeah, the robots are coming to take our jobs.
Is AI going to make us all obsolete?
It's a valid concern. Like, technology is advancing so fast, it's like, who knows what jobs are going to be around in a few years.
That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it is. So what does Susskind say about all this? Like, is he saying we should just, like, give up on economic growth altogether?
It doesn't go that far, but he does explore some alternative ways to measure progress, like the Genuine Progress Indicator, or GPI, and the Human Development Index, or HDI.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
Yeah, those metrics take into account things beyond just economic output, like environmental sustainability and well-being.
So it's not just about how much stuff we produce, but about the quality of life.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
But he also talks about the degrowth movement, right?
Yeah, the folks who think we need to actually shrink the economy to save the planet.
Which is like a pretty radical idea, right? Like intentionally shrinking the economy.
It is, but Susskind does acknowledge their concerns.
He doesn't just dismiss them?
No, he takes them seriously. But he also points out that there's this debate between those who want degrowth and those who believe in green growth.
Oh, yeah, green growth.
The idea that we can decouple economic growth from resource use and environmental damage.
So basically have our cake and eat it too.
Exactly. Can we grow the economy without trashing the planet?
I mean, I'm curious about that too. Like, is it actually possible?
Well, there's some promising evidence that it might be.
Really?
Yeah, think about the price of solar energy.
It's gone way down.
Right, like plummeted in recent years. That's a prime example of how innovation can make green technologies more affordable.
And make them more competitive with fossil fuels.
Right.
So maybe green growth isn't just some like hippie fantasy.
It could be a real possibility.
Okay, so green growth might be on the table, but what does Susskind ultimately say we should do about all these challenges?
Well, he argues that instead of giving up on growth altogether, we need to redirect it towards outcomes that are actually beneficial.
Like steered in the right direction.
Exactly. He calls for a second industrial enlightenment.
Ooh, that sounds fancy.
It's basically a conscious effort to guide technological progress in a way that serves humanity and the planet.
So not just growth for growth's sake.
Right, growth with a purpose.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have to dive into his specific strategies for redirecting growth in the next part of our deep dive, so stay tuned.
Can't wait. Welcome back
To Too Lazy to Read.
We're getting into the nitty-gritty of growth by Daniel Susskind.
And his idea of a second industrial enlightenment, like steering technology in a better direction.
Right, for people and the planet.
Exactly. Last time we were talking about the good and bad of growth.
All those downsides.
Yeah, climate change, inequality, AI taking jobs.
The whole shebang.
Yeah. But now I'm really curious, like, where does Susskind even start to fix this?
Well, he starts with something you might not expect: intellectual property.
Patents and copyrights and all that.
Yep, that whole system.
Honestly, not the most exciting thing at first glance.
I know, right? But it's actually super important.
So you're saying, like, patents are the key to the future?
Well, Susskind argues that the way we do intellectual property now is kind of outdated.
Outdated?
It can actually hold back new ideas, you know?
I don't see how.
Well, it rewards the people who made discoveries in the past, which is good, but it can make it harder for people today to build on those ideas.
Because they have to, like, pay to use them or something?
Exactly. It can get really expensive and complicated and slow everything down.
He had some funny examples in the book, right?
Oh, yeah, like trying to patent the color orange.
Seriously?
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but it shows how the system can be abused.
So it's not about, like, punishing inventors or anything?
No, it's about finding a better balance.
So should we just get rid of intellectual property altogether then?
He doesn't think so. We still need to encourage people to come up with new stuff.
Okay, so what's the solution?
He suggests some reforms, like stricter rules about what can be patented.
So we can weed out the ridiculous ones.
Right, and maybe a use it or lose it policy.
Yeah. So patents don't just sit around gathering dust.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And he talks about alternatives to traditional patents.
Like what?
Well, in areas like medicine, prizes might work better than patents.
Prizes.
Yeah, like a reward for whoever comes up with a cure for something.
But then wouldn't everyone get to use the cure?
That's the point. It would make sure life-saving discoveries are available to everyone.
Not just locked up by some big company.
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. So intellectual property is one thing. What else does he talk about?
He gets into education and investment.
Those are usually seen as like the answers for economic growth, right?
Yeah, but he's cautious about oversimplifying things.
So just throwing money at schools and building more factories isn't going to magically fix everything.
Not quite. He says with education, not everyone can be a rocket scientist.
True.
There's a limit to how much education can boost everyone's earning potential.
Yeah, and we can't just mindlessly build more stuff and expect that to equal progress.
Exactly. It's about quality, not just quantity.
Right.
He calls that capital fundamentalism, this idea that just building more factories will automatically lead to growth.
Which isn't always true.
Nope. He says we need to invest in things that align with the skills people need in a changing economy.
That makes sense. But there's still this big issue of automation.
The robots are coming?
Yeah, it feels like every day there's a new headline about robots stealing our jobs.
It's a real concern, especially for young people.
Yeah, like, how are we supposed to plan for the future when we don't even know what jobs will exist?
Right, well, Susskind doesn't shy away from that fear.
So what is he?
He says instead of trying to resist automation, we should embrace it, but strategically.
Embrace the robots.
In a way, yeah, we need to guide it towards tasks that complement human skills, not just replace them.
So robots as partners, not replacements.
Exactly.
I can get behind that.
And this connects to a concept called induced innovation.
Induced innovation.
It's the idea that we can influence the direction of technology by creating the right incentives.
Okay, can you give me an example?
Sure, think about the COVID-19 vaccines.
Oh yeah, that was fast.
Right. The pandemic created this huge pressure to find a solution quickly.
And a lot of money was poured into research.
Exactly. It was like a giant prize for whoever could develop a vaccine first.
And worked.
It did. Researchers developed multiple effective vaccines in record time.
So that's induced innovation.
It shows how powerful incentives can be in shaping technology.
So how do we apply that to automation, though?
Well, that's where Susskind's second industrial enlightenment comes in.
Okay, back to that.
It's about making conscious choices about the future we want and then using policy to make it happen.
So it's not about just letting the market decide or letting technology control us.
Right. It's about taking control and shaping the future.
That's pretty empowering.
It is. Susskind believes in humanity's ability to innovate, but he says we need to be more deliberate about our goals.
So it's not just growth for the sake of growth.
Exactly. It's about growth that leads to a better world.
I like that a lot.
He wants more people involved in these decisions, too.
Not just the politicians and the tech CEOs.
Right. He suggests these things called mini-publics.
Mini-publics.
Yeah, basically citizen assemblies where people from all walks of life can learn about these issues, discuss them, and offer recommendations.
So everyone has a voice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about making sure technological progress reflects what society as a whole wants.
Not just the interests of a few powerful people.
Right.
That's a really cool idea, but it also seems kind of challenging.
How so?
Well, how do you make sure these mini-publics are really representative of everyone?
That's a good question.
And how do you make sure that the people in power actually listen to what these citizens say?
Another good question. And Susskind admits he doesn't have all the answers.
Yeah, but he thinks it's worth trying.
He believes we need to experiment with new ways of making decisions if we want to navigate this whole growth dilemma.
And make sure technology benefits everyone.
Exactly.
Welcome back to Too Lazy to Read.
We're wrapping up our deep dive into growth by Daniel Susskind.
Yeah, figuring out what it all means for, creating a future that's both prosperous and fulfilling.
We've talked about the ups and downs of economic growth.
Good, the bad, the ugly.
And Susskind's vision for a second industrial enlightenment.
Where we're actively shaping technology.
Taking the reins instead of just letting it run wild.
Right. But in the real world, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
There are always trade-offs.
Every choice has consequences.
And that's exactly what Susskind digs into in this last part of the book.
Yeah, he really tackles those tough choices head on.
It's something anyone who's trying to make smart decisions about their future needs to understand.
For sure.
He even brings up this classic economics book from way back in 1975.
Oh, wow.
Equality and Efficiency, The Big Trade-Off by Arthur Okun.
Catchy title.
Right. It's amazing how relevant this book still is today.
What do you say?
Well, Okun argued that there's often this tension between trying to make things economically equal for everyone and trying to maximize efficiency.
So you can't always have both.
Right. It's like you got to pick one or the other.
And how does that play into this whole growth dilemma?
Well, it pops up everywhere. For example, policies that are aimed at reducing inequality, which is a huge issue for young people today, might sometimes lead to slightly slower economic growth overall.
So helping people might hurt the economy a little.
In the short term, maybe?
Or if we try to protect the environment, it might make some things more expensive.
Right, it's a balancing act.
Always got to weigh the pros and cons.
Exactly. And there's rarely a perfect solution.
Oh, that's frustrating.
I know it's complicated, but Susskind says we shouldn't let that paralyze us.
So we can't just give up.
No, he says we need to be upfront about the trade-offs and make choices based on what we value most.
What we think is important.
Exactly. And he's actually pretty optimistic that we can use smart policies to soften the blow of some of these trade-offs.
Like make the best of a tough situation.
Right. It's not about settling for the lesser of two evils. It's about making progress on multiple fronts.
Okay, so how do we do that? Can you give me some examples?
Sure. He uses green growth as a good example.
Green growth.
Yeah. Remember how people used to say it was impossible to grow the economy without hurting the environment?
Like more growth always equals more pollution.
Right. But we've seen that that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, like solar energy's gotten so much cheaper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shows that innovation can make green technologies more affordable.
And then they can compete with the old polluting ones.
Right. And that's where Susskind's idea about directed technological progress comes in.
Okay. Remind me how that works again.
We can invest in research, create incentives for green innovation, and implement policies that support clean energy.
So we can actually make green growth happen.
Exactly. It's not a choice between growth or the environment.
It's about making them work together.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah.
And can we do the same thing with automation?
We can try. Susskind says we can invest in education and training programs that help people develop the skills they'll need in a job market where robots and humans are working side by side.
So we're not trying to stop automation.
Not necessarily. It's about adapting to it.
Recognizing that change is going to happen.
But we can influence the direction of that change.
We're not just along for the ride.
Exactly.
And this brings us to one of Suskind's big points.
What's that?
He says, we all need to have a say in shaping the future of technology.
It can't just be the politicians and the tech CEOs making all the decisions.
He wants regular people involved.
Yes, he suggests experimenting with these things called mini-publics.
We talked about those before, right?
Yeah, they're like citizen assemblies where people from all walks of life can come together to learn about these issues, have discussions, and offer recommendations.
It's about making sure technology reflects what society wants.
Not just what a few powerful people want.
So it's like a more democratic way of dealing with technology.
Exactly.
That's a really powerful idea.
It is, but it also seems really hard to pull off.
Yeah, like how do you make sure these mini publics are really representative? And how do you make sure that the people in power actually listen to what they say?
Those are great questions, and Susskind doesn't claim to have all the answers.
But he thinks it's worth trying.
Absolutely. He believes we need to try new things, experiment with new ways of making decisions if we want to navigate this whole growth dilemma.
And steer technology in a direction that benefits everyone.
Exactly.
I love how Susskind ends the book. He reminds us that for most of human history, life was about stagnation.
Things just didn't change much.
And it was only with the rise of modern economic growth that we saw all this incredible progress.
Medicine, technology, living standards all went up.
But now he says we're at a crossroads.
A turning point.
Yeah, we can either keep going down the path of just more and more growth, accepting all the costs and hoping for the best, or we can choose a different path.
A path where we actually think about what kind of growth we want.
Growth that's more just and sustainable.
Right, growth that benefits everyone.
That's a powerful challenge.
It is.
I think that Suskind's book gives us a good starting point for how to actually do it.
It's definitely a book that makes you think about the future in a new way.
With a sense of urgency and possibility.
That's what we try to do here at Too Lazy to Read.
Yeah, we hope this deep dive into growth has given you some new ideas and maybe inspired you to join the conversation about the future we're creating.
A future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Exactly. Thanks for listening.
And be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into books that challenge us to think differently.
And help us build a better world.
Until next time, happy reading.
Or should we say happy listening?